I'm Elara Vance, and at 36, I had done what my parents always said was impossible. I designed and built my dream home on the rugged cliffs of Big Sur. It wasn't just a house. It was years of sacrifice, hard work, and quiet defiance wrapped in glass and stone. But all of it, everything I had worked for, was ripped away with a single forged signature. By the people I trusted most, my own parents. They sold my sanctuary right out from under me, and I never saw it coming. But what they didn't expect was that their betrayal would lead to something far greater than I ever imagined. Before I share how I turned the deepest wound of my life into my greatest victory, let me know where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you. This story might be exactly what you need to hear. This story really kicks off when I was a kid growing up in a quiet, unassuming suburb of Palo Alto, California. My parents, Eleanor and Victor Vance, were, let's just say, practical people. Middle class, always focused on appearances and financial stability. Dreams, artistic pursuits, those were luxuries, distractions from the serious business of paying the bills. From my earliest memories, I found solace in drawing. Not little doodles, but elaborate floor plans, dream houses, entire landscapes with intricate details. I'd spend hours with colored pencils, lost in worlds of my own creation. My younger brother, Leo, was always the apple of their eye. He was more outgoing, more charming, and frankly, more of a handful. He got the lion's share of their attention, their praise, everything. "Elara, stop daydreaming about fancy houses," my mother would often say. Her voice clipped whenever she caught me sketching. "Focus on something practical, something that will actually pay the bills." It wasn't malice, I don't think. Just a profound lack of understanding. A dismissive wave of a hand over anything that wasn't immediately quantifiable. Despite their discouragement, my passion for architecture and design only grew stronger. In high school, I devoured every art and design class I could get my hands on. My teachers saw something in me, something my parents never quite did. When I was accepted to UCLA's architecture program with a partial scholarship, their reaction was lukewarm at best. "College is expensive," my father warned, shaking his head. "Architecture is competitive. Don't get your hopes up." It felt less like a warning and more like a prediction they secretly hoped would come true. But I was determined to prove them wrong. I worked 3 jobs throughout college: morning shifts at a campus coffee shop, weekend tours at the admissions office, and evenings drafting for a local firm. Every single penny not spent on tuition and books went into a savings account I'd meticulously labeled Sanctuary Fund. It was more than just a house. It was a defiant whisper against all their practical pronouncements, a tangible manifestation of a future I was building for myself, by myself. My roommate, Cassie, who later became a brilliant real estate attorney, was the only one who truly understood my vision. "You're going to design the most beautiful house someday, Elara." She'd encourage me during late-night study sessions, the scent of stale coffee and ambition hanging heavy in the air. "And I'm going to help you with all the legal paperwork." She was my anchor, my cheerleader, my grounding force in a world that often felt like quicksand. After graduation, I landed a position at a prestigious architectural firm in San Francisco. My starting salary wasn't impressive, but I lived frugally. I mean, really frugally. Tiny studio apartment, brought lunch from home every single day, avoided expensive social outings. Every month, my sanctuary fund grew, slowly but steadily. Meanwhile, Leo drifted. He dropped out of 3 different colleges, each one funded by my parents, before they finally stopped paying his tuition. He bounced between odd jobs, temporary apartments, and fleeting relationships, always needing financial bailouts that my parents readily provided. "Leo just hasn't found his path yet," my mother would explain, her voice soft, empathetic in a way it never was for me. "He's creative, Eleanor, not like you, with your structured thinking." It was a backhanded compliment, or perhaps just a statement of fact that stung. My discipline, my drive, my ability to plan and execute, those were somehow lesser qualities than Leo's chaotic, unfocused creativity. During my 5th year at the firm, I finally received my first significant bonus after bringing in a major client. Most people would have upgraded their apartment, bought a new car, or gone on a lavish vacation. Me? I spent weeks researching undeveloped coastal properties within a few hours' drive of San Francisco. That's when I found it. A 3-acre plot nestled high on a cliff, overlooking the rugged, breathtaking Big Sur coastline. Raw, untamed beauty with endless ocean views, and the scent of cypress trees carried on the wind. The land alone took nearly all my savings, but standing on that windswept bluff, watching the sunset paint the Pacific Ocean in shades of fiery orange and deep violet, I knew. This was where my sanctuary would stand. I called Cassie immediately. "I found it," I said, my voice shaking with an excitement I rarely allowed myself to show. "It's perfect." When I told my parents about my purchase, my mother scoffed. "Undeveloped land? What a waste of money. You could have put a down payment on a real house, in a nice neighborhood, something sensible." My father just shook his head. "Coastal property means expensive taxes and maintenance, Elara. You haven't thought this through." Their predictable disapproval was, by then, just background noise. For the next 7 years, I lived even more frugally. Every weekend, every spare moment, I was down in Big Sur, working alongside a small contractor, gradually building my cliffside home. I designed every inch myself. An open-concept main floor with floor-to-ceiling windows that perfectly framed the ocean, a massive stone fireplace built with local materials that echoed the rugged landscape, custom cabinetry in the kitchen that was both functional and beautiful, and a wraparound deck where I imagined hosting friends, and someday, perhaps, my own family. Every nail, every board, every fixture represented countless overtime hours, sacrificed vacations, skipped dinners out with friends. The house emerged slowly, a physical manifestation of my determination, my vision, and my unwavering belief in myself. When the final touches were completed, I stood in the great room as golden hour light streamed through the western windows, illuminating the space exactly as I had envisioned it in my original sketches, more than a decade earlier. My colleagues at the firm were genuinely impressed when I shared photos, and several asked to rent it for weekends, which helped offset some of the ongoing maintenance costs. Even my brother Leo, during his one brief visit, grudgingly admitted, "Yeah, Liv, it's pretty cool." Only my parents remained unimpressed. "All that money tied up in a place you only visit occasionally," my mother commented during a rare phone call. "And in the middle of nowhere, too." What they couldn't understand was that the cliffside house represented more than just a building to me. It was my sanctuary, my achievement, tangible proof that believing in myself, despite their doubts, had been worth it. On Friday evenings, I would make the 3-hour drive from San Francisco, feeling the weight of the work week lift from my shoulders with each mile. By Sunday night, after peaceful mornings with coffee on the deck, watching the whales migrate, and afternoons sketching new ideas by the roaring ocean, I would return to the city renewed, recharged. I never suspected that my sanctuary, my testament to self-reliance, would become the very center of the greatest betrayal of my life. Looking back now, I should have recognized the warning signs. My mother's increasingly pointed questions about the property value casually slipped into conversation. My father's sudden, uncharacteristic interest in my work schedule, especially when I mentioned upcoming business trips. And Leo's financial troubles, which seemed to grow more desperate by the month, escalating beyond his usual bailouts. But hindsight, as they say, is 20/20. I was too busy living my carefully constructed life, too absorbed in my work and my sanctuary, to notice the storm gathering on the horizon. I was too trusting, too naive, to believe that the people who raised me could ever truly harm me. Then came that Tuesday afternoon phone call, the one from Clara Jenkins. After I hung up, my hands shaking so violently I could barely type, I immediately dialed my parents' number. No answer. I tried Leo, straight to voicemail. A cold dread, heavy and suffocating, settled in my stomach. With shaking hands, I called Cassie. "I need to take emergency leave," I told my supervisor. Already packing my bag, my voice tight. Family situation. The drive from San Francisco to Big Sur, which normally took 3 hours, stretched interminably. Every mile felt like a year. I called the local sheriff's station, but without immediate proof of fraud. They couldn't intervene in what appeared, on paper, to be a legal property transfer. "It's a civil matter, ma'am," the deputy had said, his voice flat with routine. "You'll need to contact a real estate attorney." I left frantic messages for every real estate attorney in my contacts list. My mind racing through nightmare scenarios. 8 grueling hours later, fighting rush hour traffic and unexpected road construction, I finally pulled into my cliffside driveway, except It wasn't mine anymore. A massive moving truck, emblazoned with a local company's logo, stood in the parking area, and through the very floor-to-ceiling windows I had specially ordered and installed, I could see unfamiliar furniture already filling the great room. My stone fireplace, the heart of my home, now seemed to warm someone else's belongings. A middle-aged man emerged from the front door as I approached, his expression initially friendly, a neighborly smile on his face. "Can I help you?" he asked, holding a box of kitchen utensils. "I'm Elara Vance," I said, my voice sounding distant, unreal, even to my own ears. "This is my house." His friendly expression shifted to one of confusion, then dawning concern. "There must be some confusion," he said slowly, his brows furrowed. "We purchased this property from Elara Vance last month. We have all the paperwork." "May I see it?" I asked, struggling to maintain a composure that was rapidly crumbling. His wife joined him, a kind-faced woman, their 2 children peeking curiously from behind her legs. They seemed like a nice family, genuinely excited about their new cliffside home, the kind of family I had imagined enjoying this place someday, perhaps even my own. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. The man, whose name I would later learn was Michael Harrison, retrieved a folder from inside and handed me the closing documents. And there it was, my signature, on the lines, perfectly placed. But I had never seen these papers before. The notary stamp was from a small town near my parents' home, miles from where I worked or lived. The sale price, $900,000, far below what I knew the property was worth, but enough to make it seem legitimate to an outside observer. "This isn't my signature," I said quietly, the words feeling heavy, foreign on my tongue. "I never sold this house." Their faces fell as understanding dawned, as the reality of my words sunk in. The wife, Jennifer, pulled her children closer, a protective instinct. We have a power of attorney document," Michael said cautiously, pulling another paper from the folder, the power of attorney. It was dated 6 months earlier, supposedly granting my parents, Eleanor and Victor Vance, explicit authority to handle all my real estate matters. The signature looked remarkably like mine, almost eerily so. But there were subtle differences, tiny tells that only I, the original artist of that signature, would notice. The loop in my E was too tight. The final A curled the wrong way. And the date? The date coincided precisely with my business trip to Europe for a major architectural project. I had been completely unreachable for 3 days, while visiting remote sites, far from any notary's office in suburban California. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. This was orchestrated. "I need to make some calls," I said, backing away. My voice tight, strained. "This isn't your fault, but that power of attorney is forged." Back in my car, parked half a mile away at a scenic public overlook, the magnitude of the betrayal finally crashed over me. I finally broke down. Sobs racked my body, deep, wrenching, guttural sounds that tore through me. My parents had stolen my dream, my sanctuary, my achievement, my proof of self-worth. How long had they been planning this? How could they forge my signature so convincingly? I checked into the only motel in the nearest town, a dated place with faded floral bedspreads and temperamental plumbing. The front desk clerk gave me a sympathetic, knowing look as I requested a room for an indefinite stay. My hand still shook as I called Cassie, who is now a successful real estate attorney in New York. "They forged my signature, Cass," I choked out, tears still streaming down my face. "My own parents." "Do you have copies of the documents?" she asked, her attorney voice kicking in, calm and professional, a lifeline in my chaos. I sent her photos of everything the Harrison family had shown me. While waiting for her assessment, I logged into my bank accounts. No unexpected deposits. Where had the money gone? After an hour on hold with the closing attorney's office, the paralegal on the line, clearly uncomfortable, confirmed that the funds, the full $900,000, had been wired directly to an account at my parents' bank. When I called the bank, they refused to provide information about an account that wasn't mine. Cassie called back close to midnight. "Elara, this is serious. This is fraud. The power of attorney is definitely forged, but it's sophisticated work, not something your parents could have done themselves. The notary is real, but I bet if we investigate, we'll find they never actually saw you sign." "What about the Harrisons?" I asked, thinking of the kind faces, the curious children. They've already moved in. They have children. Cassie sighed. That complicates things. They're innocent purchasers. We could challenge the sale, petition to void it due to fraud. But it would be a lengthy, brutal court battle with no guarantee of success. And you'd be displacing an innocent family. I stared at the water stain on the motel ceiling, the peeling wallpaper. A bitter, cold resolve began to crystallize within me. I need to confront my parents first, I said. My voice now steady, devoid of emotion. I need to know why. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake, piecing together what little I knew. The property sold for $900,000, while clearly below market value for prime Big Sur waterfront that had recently appreciated due to limited inventory. The timing during my international trip, the forged power of attorney, all signs pointed to a carefully orchestrated plan. By morning, my sadness had hardened into a cold, fierce resolve. I checked out of the motel and began the long drive back to Palo Alto, rehearsing what I would say when I finally faced the architects of my heartbreak. The familiar suburban neighborhood where I grew up looked exactly the same. Neatly trimmed lawns, tasteful landscaping, the comforting predictability of upper-middle-class security. My parents' colonial-style home, with its fresh blue paint and white trim, appeared as solid and respectable as their reputation in the community. It all felt like a cruel mockery. I parked across the street, gathering my courage, my resolve a cold, sharp edge in my chest, before approaching the house where I'd spent 18 years of my life. The doorbell chimed the same melody I remembered from childhood, a jaunty tune that now sounded horribly out of place. My mother, Eleanor, answered. Her surprise was quickly masked by a practiced, welcoming smile. "Elara, what a wonderful surprise. We weren't expecting you." She stepped back to let me in, calling over her shoulder, "Victor, look who's here." My father emerged from his study, a book still in his hand, his initial smile faltering as he registered my expression. He knew, they both knew. The practiced pleasantries were paper-thin, easily torn. "Why don't we sit in the living room?" my mother suggested, her hostess voice firmly in place. "I'll make some tea." "I didn't come for tea," I said, remaining standing in the entryway, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor in my hands. "I came about my cliffside house." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It confirmed everything. My mother's face hardened, the mask of pleasantry completely gone, replaced by a cold, distant gaze. My father suddenly found the intricate pattern on the Persian rug fascinating. "Why don't we discuss this privately?" my mother finally said, gesturing toward the living room, her voice barely above a whisper, almost a threat. Once seated, the antique mahogany coffee table separating us like a battlefield. I placed the copied documents, the forged deed, the fake power of attorney, carefully on its polished surface. "The Harrisons seem like nice people," I said, my voice low, dangerously calm. "They showed me these. Care to explain?" My father cleared his throat, a nervous habit. "Elara, you need to understand." "Understand what?" I interrupted, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm, to maintain the control I was rapidly losing. "That you forged my signature? That you sold my house without my knowledge or consent? That you stole $900,000 from me?" "Don't be so dramatic, Elara," my mother said dismissively, waving a hand as if swatting away a fly. "That house was a financial burden you couldn't afford. We did what was necessary." "Necessary for what?" My voice cracked then, a raw edge of pain and fury cutting through my composure. "It was paid for. I had no mortgage. It was my achievement." My mother's expression turned utterly cold, the last vestiges of her polite mask completely gone. Her eyes, usually so calculating, were now hard as chips of ice. "Your brother needed help, real help, not just another loan to tide him over. He's starting a business venture with real potential this time." My stomach dropped. The world seemed to close in around me. All those years of sacrifice, of working multiple jobs, of skipping vacations and new clothes and dinners out. All those weekends spent building, instead of dating or socializing. All of it reduced to meaningless things by the woman who should have been proud of my accomplishments. "So you stole from me," I choked out, the words tasting like ash, "to give to Leo, again." "We need that money to secure your brother's future," my mother snapped, her voice rising now, losing its carefully controlled calm. "Where's the money?" I demanded, cutting her off. My father finally spoke up, his voice barely audible. It's in a trust for Leo's business, a new restaurant concept, with tremendous potential, the location alone. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was Leo's sixth business failure. My brother had previously launched and quickly bankrupted a food truck, a designer clothing line, a drop shipping website, a premium dog food delivery service, and even a bespoke artisanal coffee roasting business, each one a black hole for my parents' money. You stole my house for Leo's fifth business failure? I laughed then, a harsh, humorless sound. What makes this one different? This is different, my father insisted weakly, avoiding my gaze. He has partners this time, experienced restaurateurs. Where is he? I asked, pushing back my chair, standing up. My legs felt shaky, but my resolve was solid. I want to hear from Leo himself whether he knows his new business is funded with stolen money. My parents exchanged uneasy glances. My mother pressed her lips into a thin, tight line. Leo doesn't know the details of the financing, she admitted, her voice low. We thought it best to keep things simple. Simple? I laughed bitterly. You mean you didn't tell him you committed felony fraud? That if I pressed charges, you could go to prison? The front door opened before either of them could respond. Leo walked in, stopping short when he saw me, his face showing a mix of surprise and confusion. Liv, what are you doing here? He looked between our parents and me, sensing the thick tension in the room. Ask them about your restaurant funding, I said, my voice cold, devoid of the emotion that was churning inside me. Leo's confusion appeared genuine. What about it? Mom and Dad are investing some retirement money. What's going on? Not retirement money, I corrected him, my gaze fixed on my mother. They sold my cliffside house by forging my signature on a power of attorney, so you could have your tremendous potential restaurant. The color drained from Leo's face. His jaw went slack. What? That's not. I never asked for that. He turned to our parents, his voice cracking, filled with disbelief and a dawning horror. Tell me that's not true. My mother stood, smoothing her slacks with an air of finality, as if dismissing the entire conversation. We did what was necessary for this family, Leo. Elara has her career and her San Francisco apartment. She doesn't need a vacation home draining her finances. You need this opportunity to establish yourself. By stealing from your daughter? Leo's voice cracked again, a raw sound of pain and outrage. How could you think I'd want that? How could you do this to Elara? For the first time, I saw genuine remorse, a flicker of true regret in my father's eyes. He looked pale, defeated. We thought we were trying to help both of you, Elara. The property taxes alone. Save it, I cut him off, my voice sharp. I paid those taxes with money I earned. Just like I paid for every board and nail in that house with money I earned. You had no right. We're your parents, my mother said coldly, her voice devoid of warmth, of any recognition of wrongdoing. We've always known what's best for you, even when you couldn't see it yourself. That moment, that precise moment crystallized 36 years of conditional love, of having my achievements diminished while Leo's failures were excused, of never being quite good enough, despite my accomplishments, my relentless drive, my fierce independence. They hadn't seen me as a person with my own dreams, only as a resource to be managed, to be allocated as they saw fit. I'm calling the police, I said, pulling out my phone, my fingers fumbling slightly, but my intent clear. Elara, please, my father begged. Stepping forward, his hands outstretched as if to physically stop me. We can work this out as a family. We stopped being a family the moment you decided to steal from me, I replied, my finger hovering over the dial button. Leo stepped between us, his face stricken, pale with shock and disgust. Liv, wait. I had no idea about any of this. I'll walk away from the restaurant deal. We'll figure out how to make this right. Looking at my brother's anguished face, I realized he was as much a victim of our parents' manipulations as I was, just in a different way. They had enabled his failures while undermining my successes, creating the very problems they now claim to be solving with my stolen property. The endless cycle of dependency and resentment. I lowered the phone. I'm not making any decisions right now, I said, looking from Leo to my parents. But know this. I turned my gaze directly to Eleanor and Victor, my eyes unwavering. I will be pursuing every legal option available to me, and if there's any justice, you'll face consequences for what you've done. I walked out without waiting for their response, my legs barely supporting me, a strange mix of adrenaline and exhaustion coursing through my veins. Once inside my car, with the doors locked, I finally let the tears come again. Not just for the house, but for the family I had always hoped we could be. For the approval I had always sought but never received. And for the painful recognition that some relationships, once shattered so completely, can never be repaired. As I drove away from my childhood home, I didn't know what would come next, but I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Cassie's law office overlooked Central Park, the Manhattan skyline a stark, towering contrast to the peaceful, now-lost ocean views of my sanctuary. 3 days after the confrontation with my parents, I sat across from her massive, polished desk, surrounded by the documents we'd painstakingly gathered. The copies of the forged deed, the fraudulent power of attorney, my own meticulous records of the property's construction and maintenance. The forgery is sophisticated, Elara, Cassie explained, pointing to minute details on the power of attorney. She ran her finger along a specific line, a slight variation in ink pressure. This wasn't done by amateurs. See how the pressure points on the signature almost perfectly match your authentic one. They likely used a service that specializes in document fabrication. My parents wouldn't know how to find something like that, I said, a chilling realization dawning on me. They were many things, but criminal masterminds were not among them. Cassie nodded. Exactly. We're looking at a coordinated effort involving multiple parties. The notary, a woman named Beverly Hayes, claims she witnessed you sign, but we have your travel records proving you were in Europe that day. The real estate agent, a man named Marcus Thorne, rushed the closing process. The title company, Pacific Coast Title, failed to verify the power of attorney properly. They all have culpability here. What are my options? I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the sheer legal complexities, the web of deceit that stretched out before me. First, we file a police report for forgery and fraud immediately, Cassie stated, her voice firm, decisive. We notify the title company and the real estate attorneys who handled the closing. We can pursue criminal charges against your parents and civil action against everyone involved in the fraudulent transaction. I thought about the Harrison family, already settled in my dream home. Their children, I imagined, had probably chosen their bedrooms, started making friends with the neighbors, decorating their new space with innocent joy. What happens to the buyers? I asked, my voice softer, more vulnerable. Cassie's expression softened too. That's complicated. Legally, we could petition to void the sale due to fraud. But the Harrisons are innocent purchasers. They believed they were buying the property legitimately, in good faith. Fighting to take back the house would mean displacing that family, tearing their lives apart, and engaging in a lengthy, emotionally draining court battle with uncertain results. The thought of another family being victimized because of my parents' actions made me sick to my stomach. I had lost so much already, I couldn't bear to inflict that kind of pain on innocent people. I don't want to put them through that, I said, shaking my head. They have children. There are other approaches, Cassie assured me. We could seek financial restitution instead of the property itself. Your parents, the notary, the title company, possibly even the real estate agents involved. They all have liability here. We can make them pay. We spent the next 2 hours filing reports and drafting letters. By the time we finished, my hand cramped from signing affidavits and complaints, each stroke a conscious act of reclaiming what had been taken. What about Leo? I asked as we wrapped up. The thought of my brother caught in the crossfire nagging at me. He texted me yesterday saying he wants to talk. Be careful, Elara, Cassie warned, her voice grave. Family dynamics get complicated in fraud cases. Even if he claims to be on your side now, blood ties run deep. He's been enabled by them for so long. I met Leo at a coffee shop halfway between San Francisco and Palo Alto. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, his clothes rumpled, suggesting he hadn't been sleeping. His usual chaotic energy was gone, replaced by a defeated slump. I had no idea, he said immediately, before I even sat down, his voice raspy. I swear, Elara, I would never have taken money I knew was stolen from you. Despite everything, despite the years of frustration and resentment, I believed him. I saw the genuine shame in his eyes, the deep pain. What happened with the restaurant deal? I asked, taking a sip of the lukewarm coffee I'd ordered. I walked away, he said, staring into his untouched cup. Told my partners I couldn't proceed with the funding. They're furious, obviously, but he shrugged, a defeated gesture. It was dirty money. I couldn't live with myself. I couldn't build a dream on your shattered one. Mom and Dad must be thrilled about that, I commented dryly. Leo stared into his coffee. I'm not speaking to them right now. After you left, I confronted them. It got ugly. Dad finally admitted, this isn't the first time they've done something like this. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? Remember Grandma Vance's antique jewelry collection? Leo looked up, his eyes meeting mine, haunted. The pieces Mom claimed Grandma wanted her to sell for family expenses when we were in high school? Turns out Grandma intended those pieces to be split between you and me when we turned 30. The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. Our grandmother had passed when I was 16, and I'd always treasured the single pearl necklace I'd received, assuming the rest had been legitimately sold as my mother claimed. A carefully constructed lie, unraveling piece by piece. There's more, Leo continued hesitantly. I found receipts in Dad's office, from 3 different casinos, Atlantic City, Las Vegas, even a local one here in California. I think they have gambling problems, serious ones. They've been hiding it for years. Pieces fell into place with sickening clarity, their frequent weekend trips, the mysterious financial emergencies that sometimes occurred, requiring urgent, desperate cash infusions. Their persistent interest in my finances, despite their apparent financial stability. It all clicked. That's why they needed the money so urgently, I realized. The truth hitting me like a physical blow. Not just for your restaurant. Leo nodded miserably. I'm so sorry, Elara. I've been thinking about all the times they gave me money over the years, bailed me out of bad decisions. I wonder now where that money really came from. Who else they might have taken advantage of. As we talked, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Clara Jenkins, my former Big Sur neighbor. Heard what happened. If you need a local witness, I'm here. Also, the Harrisons are nice people. Their daughter has special needs. The house is perfect for her water therapy. The knowledge that my house, my sanctuary, was providing a therapeutic environment for a child with special needs solidified my decision not to fight for the property itself. The Harrisons deserved that house, more than my parents deserved to get away with their fraud. In the weeks that followed, the legal process moved forward with excruciating slowness. My parents hired an expensive, aggressive attorney who filed motion after motion to delay proceedings, to obscure, to deflect. Meanwhile, I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects, anything to distract myself from the hollow feeling that had taken residence in my chest. Friends tried to help, inviting me to dinners and weekend activities, but I found myself pulling away. How could I explain that my own parents had betrayed me so completely, that the sanctuary I had created for myself was gone, that I now questioned every relationship in my life, every foundation I had ever built? Family, friends, and distant relatives began taking sides as news of the legal battle, whispered and distorted, spread through our small community. Some expressed shock and unwavering support for me, their outrage echoing my own. Others, however, suggested I was overreacting to a simple misunderstanding and should forgive my parents for the sake of family harmony. You always were too sensitive, Elara, my mother's sister told me during an unwelcome phone call. Your parents were only trying to help Leo. Isn't family more important than a vacation house? I stopped answering calls from numbers I didn't recognize. The only bright spot came 6 weeks into the legal process, when Cassie called with unexpected news. Remember when we did the closing on your Big Sur property 7 years ago, and I insisted you get that special title insurance policy? The one you thought was unnecessary? Vaguely, I admitted. Between the land purchase and the years of construction, there had been countless documents and policies, a blur of legalese. Well, I just found it in your files, Cassie said, her voice brimming with barely suppressed excitement. And Elara, you're going to want to sit down for this. Owner's title insurance with fraud and forgery protection. We reviewed the policy in her office the next day. It's not standard coverage, Cassie explained, beaming, but I always recommend it to my clients, especially for significant purchases like raw land. It protects against defects in the title, including those caused by forgery or fraud. I vaguely remembered signing off on the additional coverage, thinking it an unnecessary expense, but trusting Cassie's judgment implicitly. "So what does this mean exactly?" I asked, a flicker of hope, the first since discovering the theft, igniting within me. "It means the insurance company is obligated to compensate you for losses resulting from forgery, fraud, or impersonation related to your title." Cassie couldn't contain her smile. "You're covered for the full market value of the property." "They'll pay me the $900,000? "Not just the sale price, Elara," Cassie corrected, her voice firm. "The current market value, and because the insurance company will be the one paying you, they'll pursue legal action against all responsible parties to recoup their losses. They have far more resources and leverage than we do as individual plaintiffs. They are the Goliath here, not us." The meeting with Mr. Wallace, the insurance company's fraud investigator, took place the following week. He was methodical, thorough, reviewing every document related to the original purchase, the fraudulent sale, and everything in between. He wasn't warm, but he was efficient, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a powerful entity was on my side. "This is one of the clearest cases of title fraud I've seen," he confirmed after several hours, closing a thick binder of documents. "And frankly, Ms. Vance, your documentation is impeccable. Most people don't keep every receipt and record related to their property like you did." My architectural training had instilled in me a nearly obsessive attention to detail and documentation. Every improvement to the cliffside house, every tax payment, every insurance premium, all meticulously filed, and now proving invaluable. "So what happens next?" I asked. "We'll have an independent appraisal done to determine current market value," Mr. Wallace said, his tone neutral, professional. "Then we'll issue payment to you, while simultaneously pursuing recovery from the responsible parties." His expression turned serious. "You should know that will include your parents. Our company will press for both civil damages and criminal prosecution." The thought still made my stomach knot, a complex mix of vengeful satisfaction and profound grief. But I nodded. "I understand." "Also," Mr. Wallace added, checking his notes, "standard procedure is to investigate whether this is part of a pattern of behavior. If your parents have committed similar frauds against others, that would significantly strengthen our case." I thought about what Leo had told me about our grandmother's jewelry, and my parents' hidden gambling habits. "You might want to look into their casino activities," I suggested, my voice low. "My brother believes they have serious gambling problems, and they sold my grandmother's jewelry that was meant for us, claiming she wanted it sold for expenses." Mr. Wallace made a note, his pen scratching against the paper. "We'll investigate thoroughly. Meanwhile, the appraisal should be completed within 2 weeks." As promised, Leo had walked away from the restaurant venture, losing his business partners and their respect in the process. He'd taken a job at a friend's landscaping company while figuring out his next steps. We spoke regularly now, our shared trauma creating a stronger, more honest bond than we'd had in years. "Mom tried to visit me at work today," he told me during one of our calls, his voice flat. I refused to speak to her. Dad's been leaving voicemails, saying they can explain everything if I'll just hear them out. "Are you going to?" I asked, knowing the answer. "No," Leo said firmly, his voice holding a new, unexpected strength. "They've been manipulating both of us our entire lives. Me, by bailing me out and never letting me face consequences. You, by dismissing your accomplishments and making you feel inadequate despite your success. I'm done with their games." My parents, realizing the seriousness of their situation as the insurance investigation progressed, began a desperate campaign to get me to drop the matter. They sent emails pleading for family unity. They had their pastor call me, appealing to forgiveness and biblical principles. They even showed up at my office in San Francisco, causing such a scene that building security had to escort them out. "You're our daughter," my mother had cried, her voice cracking, as the security guard led her toward the elevator. "How can you do this to your own parents?" The question echoed in my mind for days afterward. How could I do this? But the real question, the one that kept me up at night, was, how could they have done this to me? The answer, or at least a crucial piece of it, came unexpectedly during a session with the therapist I'd started seeing to process the betrayal. "Your parents violated your boundaries in the most extreme way," she pointed out, her voice gentle but firm. "They literally stole your property through criminal means. The consequences they're facing aren't something you're doing to them. They're the natural result of what they chose to do to you. You are seeking justice for a serious crime. The distinction helped ease the insidious guilt that had been plaguing me. I wasn't punishing my parents. I was protecting myself. I was seeking justice for a serious crime, and in doing so, I was finally, truly standing up for myself. 2 weeks later, Mr. Wallace called with news that would change everything again. "We've completed our investigation and the property appraisal," he said, his tone giving nothing away. Careful neutrality masking something beneath. "Can you come to our office tomorrow?" His careful neutrality made me nervous. "Is there a problem with my claim?" I asked, my heart thumping. "Not at all," he assured me, "but there are some findings you'll want to hear in person." That night, I barely slept, wondering what complications might have arisen. Was the forgery somehow not provable? Had my parents found a loophole? Would the insurance company try to minimize my compensation? The next morning, I arrived at the insurance company offices, prepared for a fight. Instead, Mr. Wallace welcomed me with what almost looked like suppressed excitement. "Ms. Vance, are you aware that 3 months before your house was sold, the Big Sur area, specifically the section encompassing your property, was rezoned for major commercial development?" I shook my head dumbfounded. "No, I've been so focused on a major project at work, and everything else, I haven't kept up with local zoning changes." Mr. Wallace slid a document across the desk. It was the appraisal report. "According to our appraisal, based on the new commercial zoning and comparable recent sales, your property's current market value is approximately $3.5 million. The room seemed to spin, my vision blurred. $3.5 million. Your parents sold a property worth nearly $3.5 million for less than $900,000, Mr. Wallace confirmed, his voice devoid of judgment, only factual. They didn't even have it properly appraised before the sale. Either they were completely unaware of the rezoning, or they were in such a hurry to get cash that they didn't bother researching current values. For the first time since this nightmare began, a strange, almost manic smile spread across my lips. The house I had lovingly built, that represented years of sacrifice and determination, that my parents had dismissed as a wasteful indulgence, had more than tripled in value right under their noses. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. "Our company will be issuing you a check for $3.5 million, the full current market value," Mr. Wallace continued. "We'll then pursue recovery from all responsible parties, including your parents, the notary who falsified documents, and the title company that failed to properly verify the power of attorney." As the implications sank in, a wave of shock, then a profound sense of justice, washed over me. I was actually going to come out of this financially ahead. The betrayal still hurt deeply, viscerally, but there was a certain poetic justice in the fact that my parents' attempt to steal from me had backfired so spectacularly. Their greed had blinded them to the true value of what they were taking. "There's one more thing you should know," Mr. Wallace added, his eyes meeting mine. "Your brother contacted us yesterday. He's offered to provide evidence about your parents' gambling activities and previous financial deceptions. That kind of family testimony significantly strengthens our case." Leo's decision to actively support the case against our parents couldn't have been easy. It represented a final, definitive break from the dysfunctional family dynamics that had shaped both our lives. When I called him that evening to thank him, he sounded more at peace than he had in weeks. "It's the right thing to do, Elara," he said, his voice firm. "I've spent my whole life letting them clean up my messes. It's time I cleaned up theirs." Meanwhile, my parents had learned about the property's true value and the insurance company's intention to pursue them for the full $3.5 million. Their expensive attorney contacted Cassie, suddenly eager to discuss settlement options. "They're panicking," Cassie told me, a grim satisfaction in her voice. "They probably thought worst case, they'd have to return the $900,000 if they got caught. They never imagined being on the hook for nearly $3.5 million, plus legal fees and possible criminal charges." "Do they have that kind of money?" I asked, realizing I had no idea about my parents' true financial situation. I knew they were comfortable, but $3.5 million, not even close, Cassie confirmed after our financial investigators had done their work. "According to our investigation, they've burned through most of their retirement savings with gambling and bad investments. They do have equity in their house, some investment accounts, and your father's pension, but they'd still be financially ruined. This would leave them with virtually nothing." The revelation should have brought satisfaction, but instead, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. These were still the people who had raised me, who had taught me to read, who had attended my college graduation despite their doubts about my chosen field. Their betrayal hadn't erased those memories, just tainted them with the knowledge that their love had always been conditional, their support always contingent on control. As the insurance company prepared its case, the Harrisons reached out through their attorney, horrified to learn they had unknowingly purchased a stolen property. They want you to know they're heartbroken about the situation, their lawyer explained. They've offered to vacate the property if that's what you want, though they hope to find a way to stay. Their integrity, their genuine distress, only confirm my decision not to reclaim the house itself. That chapter of my life had closed. What mattered now was building something new from the ashes of betrayal. The insurance company moved with surprising efficiency. 6 weeks after my meeting with Mr. Wallace, a check for $3.5 million was deposited into my account. The amount was staggering, far more than I had ever expected to recover, and more than enough to start a new chapter. The company will handle all legal proceedings from here, Mr. Wallace explained during our final meeting. We'll be pursuing full recovery from all parties involved in the fraud: your parents, the notary, the title company, and the real estate agents who failed to verify the documentation properly. What's likely to happen to my parents? I asked, still conflicted about their fate despite everything. Based on the evidence we've gathered, including your brother's testimony about their gambling activities and previous financial manipulations, they'll likely face both civil and criminal consequences, Mr. Wallace stated plainly. Best case for them is significant financial penalties and probation. Worst case could include prison time, especially for your mother, who appears to have been the primary orchestrator. The investigation had revealed that my mother had researched forgery services using the family computer, contacted the notary through a mutual acquaintance, and coordinated the entire sale, while my father played a more passive, enabling role. None of this surprised me. My mother had always been the family's decision-maker, with my father following her lead in most matters, quietly enabling her increasingly desperate schemes. Leo had provided bank statements showing large cash withdrawals coinciding with my parents' weekend getaways to Atlantic City and Las Vegas casinos. He'd also given investigators documentation about our grandmother's jewelry collection that proved our parents had lied about her wishes and sold valuable family heirlooms that should have been passed down to us. The fraud against you wasn't an isolated incident or a momentary lapse in judgment, Mr. Wallace concluded. It was part of a pattern of financial deception that's been going on for years. As the legal machinery moved forward, I focused on rebuilding my life. The first step was finding a place to live that could begin to heal the wound left by losing my cliffside sanctuary. After weeks of searching, I found a spacious loft in a historic building in San Francisco's Potrero Hill neighborhood. It had high ceilings, massive industrial windows overlooking the city, and architectural details that spoke to my designer's eye. It wasn't waterfront property, but it offered something I needed more at that moment: security. The building had a doorman, secure entry, and was walking distance from my office. I wouldn't have to see my car in the driveway and remember the frantic drive to Big Sur. I wouldn't have to look at the ocean and think about what I had lost, only what I could build anew. Meanwhile, my parents were growing increasingly desperate as the insurance company's case against them progressed. Their attempts to contact me escalated from pleading emails to desperate voicemails. "Elara, please," my father begged in one message, his voice thick with a fake sincerity that made my stomach churn. "We've contacted the Harrisons and offered to buy back the house at a profit for them. We can make this right. Just call off the insurance company." I deleted the message without responding. The Harrisons had already told me they had refused all contact with my parents, having been informed of the fraud by their attorney. My mother took a different, more manipulative approach. "This vendetta will destroy this family," she said coldly in her message, her voice dripping with venom. "Is that what you want? To see your parents penniless in their old age? What happened to honoring thy father and mother?" Her attempt to claim moral high ground after committing felony fraud, after years of emotional manipulation and financial exploitation, might have been amusing if it weren't so pathetic. 3 months after receiving the insurance payout, I received an unexpected call from the Harrisons' attorney. "My clients would like to speak with you, if you're comfortable with that," he explained. "They have a proposal they'd like to discuss." Curious and feeling a strange sense of empathy for them, I agreed to a video call. The Harrison family appeared on my screen, Michael and Jennifer, along with their 3 children, including 12-year-old Emma, who I learned had cerebral palsy. "We wanted to thank you," Jennifer began, her voice soft but earnest, "for not trying to take the house back. When we learned what had happened, we were devastated, both for you and for Emma. The ocean access, the quiet serenity of that home. It has been life-changing for her therapy." Michael nodded. "We also want you to know that we've made some discoveries about the property that we feel you should be aware of." They explained that shortly after moving in, they'd been approached by a major developer interested in purchasing their entire section of the Big Sur coast for a luxury eco-resort. The rezoning that had tripled my property's value was just the beginning. "The developer has offered us $5 million for the property," Michael said, obviously a little stunned himself. "Given the circumstances, we felt you should know about this." The figure was almost double what the insurance company had paid me, which was already triple what my parents had sold it for. The magnitude of my parents' financial miscalculation, their desperate short-sightedness, was almost incomprehensible. They had stolen something worth millions, only to sell it for a fraction of its value, then turn around and claim I was ungrateful. "The developer also mentioned they had approached your parents several times before the sale to us," Jennifer added, her voice filled with a quiet incredulity. "Apparently, your mother rejected their offers without even telling you about them. She just shut them down." This new information hit me like a physical blow, a fresh wound opening. My parents hadn't just stolen my property. They had deliberately sabotaged opportunities for me to sell it legitimately for far more than they'd ultimately gotten for it. The only explanation was that they hadn't wanted me to have the money. They'd wanted to control it themselves. They'd wanted it for Leo, for their gambling, for their twisted sense of family management. "What are you planning to do about the developer offer?" I asked the Harrisons, my voice thick with emotion. "We're considering it," Michael admitted. "With that kind of money, we could buy a property even better suited for Emma's needs, perhaps with a custom therapy pool, and have substantial funds left over for her long-term care. But we felt wrong making that decision without talking to you first." Their integrity, their genuine compassion, was a stark, shining contrast to my parents' cold deception. "You should take the offer," I told them, a warmth spreading through my chest. "You have no obligation to me. The insurance company has already compensated me fairly. That house was meant for you and for Emma. It was always meant to be a place of healing." After ending the call, I immediately contacted Mr. Wallace to share the new information about the developer and my parents' rejection of their earlier, much higher offers. "This strengthens our case considerably," he confirmed, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "It proves premeditation and deliberate financial harm beyond the fraud itself. It shows they didn't just steal. They actively prevented you from realizing the true value of your asset." When the news about the developer's interest became public, the plans for a luxury eco-resort that would create jobs and tax revenue for the Big Sur community, my parents' remaining supporters fell silent. It was impossible to frame their actions as well-intentioned family intervention when they had deliberately blocked legitimate offers that would have benefited me enormously and had gone to such lengths to steal my property. The narrative they had carefully constructed for years of being practical, loving parents doing their best utterly collapsed. The final, sickening piece of the puzzle fell into place when Leo, still actively trying to help, discovered communications between our mother and Beverly Hayes, the notary who had falsified the power of attorney. They weren't just casual acquaintances, as the notary had claimed. They had attended the same gambling addiction support group 2 years earlier. My mother, desperate, had leveraged that connection, and likely the notary's own financial vulnerabilities, to facilitate the fraud. It wasn't just a random accomplice. It was a deliberate exploitation of someone else's weakness, just as they had exploited mine. With mounting irrefutable evidence and no viable defense left, my parents' attorney finally advised them to seek a settlement agreement. The insurance company, eager to recoup their $3.5 million payout, was willing to negotiate terms that might keep my parents out of prison in exchange for maximum financial recovery. They wanted their money back, and they wanted it fast. The proposed settlement was harsh, but just. It would require my parents to sell their home, liquidate all investments except a minimal retirement fund, and forfeit most of my father's pension. They would be left with just enough to rent a modest apartment in a neighboring state and cover basic living expenses. The notary and title company would cover the remainder of the insurance company's losses. Before agreeing to the settlement terms, the insurance company consulted me as the primary victim of the fraud. "We can proceed with criminal charges regardless of the civil settlement," Mr. Wallace explained. "That decision is technically in the hands of the prosecutor, but your input would carry significant weight." The question of whether to push for my parents to face criminal charges haunted me for days. Part of me, the raw, wounded part, wanted them to experience the full consequences of their actions, to feel the same violation and helplessness they had inflicted on me. To see my mother in a prison jumpsuit, my father's health deteriorating behind bars. That vengeful thought flickered, tantalizing. But another part of me, the part that had begun to heal, recoiled. That wouldn't bring my house back. It wouldn't mend the broken past. I called Leo, the only person who truly understood the complexity of the situation, the messy tangle of love, resentment, and profound betrayal. "What would you do?" I asked him, my voice barely a whisper. "I can't answer that for you, Elara," he said after a long pause, his voice thoughtful, matured by his own journey through this mess. "But I can tell you what I've learned from this whole mess. Our parents never really saw us as independent people with our own lives and choices. To them, we were extensions of themselves, resources to be managed, problems to be fixed. Mom and Dad will never truly understand what they did wrong because they don't recognize our autonomy. Prison won't change that. It won't give them insight." His insight resonated with a realization that had been forming in my own mind. The greatest punishment for my parents wouldn't be prison. It would be losing control over their finances, their carefully cultivated reputation in the community, and most importantly, over Leo and me. They would be forced to face the consequences of their choices, stripped of their power and their ability to manipulate, and I would be free. "I don't need them to go to prison," I told Mr. Wallace the next day, my voice clear and steady. "The financial settlement is enough, as long as it includes no contact orders for both me and my brother. I need that boundary." When the final settlement was reached, my parents avoided prison but lost nearly everything else. Their elegant home, most of their savings, my father's pension, their standing in the community, and all access to their children. They were left with the bare minimum, a stark reality of their choices. The notary, Beverly Hayes, faced criminal charges and lost her license permanently. The title company and real estate agency involved paid significant penalties and implemented new, stringent verification procedures. Justice, in its own way, had been served. As for the Harrisons, they accepted the developer's generous offer and purchased a beautiful new property in Southern California, specifically designed for accessible living, with features that would benefit Emma's therapy for years to come, including a custom hydrotherapy pool. They sent me a heartfelt thank you note with a photo of their daughter, Emma, smiling, radiant, in her new therapy pool. A reminder that sometimes good can emerge from even the darkest situations. The irony wasn't lost on me. My wasteful investment, the dream my parents had dismissed and then stolen, had ultimately generated enough value to secure not just my future, but Emma Harrison's as well. My carefully chosen property, my lovingly designed house, and my meticulous documentation had all combined to transform betrayal into blessing. When the Harrisons' sale to the developer made local news, complete with plans for a luxury eco-resort that would create jobs and tax revenue for the Big Sur community, my professional reputation received an unexpected boost. Colleagues who had admired my architectural work now also recognized my investment savvy. My firm, recognizing my unique blend of design talent and business acumen, offered me a partnership track, acknowledging that my personal design aesthetic, literally, had appreciated in the real estate market by over 400% in 7 years. As the legal proceedings finally concluded, I found myself in an entirely different life than I had planned. Wealthier, wiser, and unexpectedly free from the unconscious need for parental approval that had unconsciously driven so many of my choices. The cliffside house was gone, but what it had given me was far more valuable than property, financial security, professional recognition, and most importantly, the clear-eyed understanding that I had built something of tremendous value entirely on my own. 6 months after receiving the insurance settlement, I stood in the center of my newly renovated loft in San Francisco. The space reflected everything I had learned from my Big Sur experience, but with a distinctly urban sophistication. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the bustling city, providing a different kind of captivating view than the one I had lost. The $3.5 million insurance payout, wisely invested with the help of a fiduciary financial advisor, had set me on a path to financial independence I had never imagined possible in my 30s. My new home was my sanctuary, but unlike the cliffside house, it didn't represent years of sacrifice and struggle. Instead, it symbolized resilience and new beginnings. The healing process hadn't been linear. Some days, I still woke up reaching for my Big Sur keys, momentarily forgetting they would never open that door again. Other days, the sense of betrayal felt so fresh it took my breath away. A sharp, physical ache. But increasingly, those moments were outnumbered by days of peace and forward momentum. Therapy had been essential to my recovery. Family betrayal cuts deeper than almost any other kind, my therapist explained during one session. The people who were supposed to protect you caused deliberate harm instead. That violation of the most fundamental trust requires serious processing. Processing meant acknowledging not just the loss of my property, but the painful recognition that my parents had never truly supported my independence or celebrated my achievements. The theft was merely the most extreme expression of a lifelong pattern of control and dismissal. Your parents saw your resources as family resources they had a right to allocate, my therapist observed. But they didn't extend you the same consideration when it came to their decisions or Leo's needs. The insight helped me understand why the betrayal had happened, though it didn't excuse it. My parents' actions were born from a fundamentally flawed perspective about family relationships and boundaries, compounded by a desperate gambling addiction and financial desperation. Leo had gone through his own parallel journey of healing and self-discovery. After years of false starts and failed ventures, enabled by our parents' constant bailouts, he had finally found stable footing working for a landscape design company. His natural creativity, freed from our parents' suffocating expectations, had flourished in the outdoor environment. 3 months after the settlement, I had used a portion of my insurance money to help Leo start a legitimate business, a garden center specializing in native plants and sustainable landscaping. The investment was structured as a proper business loan, with clear terms, professional documentation, and a solid business plan, developed with guidance from a small business advisor. "This isn't a handout, Leo," I had told him firmly. "It's an investment in a viable business. I believe in your vision and your ability to make this work." The distinction was important to both of us. Unlike our parents' approach of enabling dependence while claiming to help, my support came with appropriate boundaries and expectations. Leo had embraced the responsibility, working tirelessly to make the business succeed, and making every loan payment on time. It was a new chapter for him too, one built on genuine merit, not on stolen money. As for my parents, I had maintained the no-contact order established in the settlement. They had moved to a small apartment in a neighboring state, their reduced circumstances a daily reminder of the consequences of their actions. According to Leo, who received occasional updates from distant relatives, our mother had finally sought treatment for her gambling addiction, while our father had taken a part-time job to supplement their limited remaining income. Some family members had pressured me to reconcile, invoking religious principles of forgiveness and family unity. "They're still your parents," my aunt had insisted during one unwelcome call. "They made a terrible mistake, but surely you can find it in your heart to forgive them." What these well-meaning relatives failed to understand was that forgiveness didn't necessitate reconciliation. I could release the consuming anger and bitterness without exposing myself to further harm from people who had shown no genuine remorse or understanding of the damage they had caused. Forgiveness is an internal process that benefits you, not an external action that benefits them, my therapist had explained. You can forgive without restoring trust that hasn't been earned. That distinction had been liberating. I could wish my parents well in their recovery without allowing them back into my life. I could hope they found peace without making myself vulnerable to their dysfunction ever again. The most unexpected aspect of my healing journey had been discovering a community of others rebuilding after betrayal. Through a support group recommended by my therapist, I met people who had experienced similar violations of trust by family members, partners, or close friends. Their stories helped normalize my experience and provided practical strategies for rebuilding. The hardest part was learning to trust again, shared one woman whose business partner had embezzled their company funds. Not just trusting others, but trusting my own judgment after it had been so catastrophically wrong. I recognized that same struggle in myself. If I had misread my own parents so completely, how could I trust my perceptions of anyone else? The question had initially paralyzed me, making me withdraw from friendships and potential relationships. The breakthrough came when I realized that trusting wisely didn't mean never being hurt again. It meant creating appropriate boundaries, paying attention to red flags I might have previously ignored, and building relationships gradually based on consistent actions, rather than assuming unconditional trust from the start. 6 months after the settlement, I took a major step in my professional life, leveraging my experience to launch a side business consulting on secure property investments and fraud prevention. My story, shared carefully in professional contexts, had resonated with many who feared similar vulnerabilities in their own arrangements. "You turned a devastating loss into valuable expertise," my firm's senior partner observed. That's the definition of resilience. The consulting work led to speaking engagements at real estate investment conferences, where I shared practical steps for protecting property from fraud, emphasizing the importance of title insurance, verifying POAs, and maintaining meticulous records. Each presentation helped transform my narrative from victim to expert, from someone who had lost everything to someone whose experience could help others protect what mattered to them. Meanwhile, I had begun sketching plans for a new vacation property, this one in the high desert of Joshua Tree, rather than by the ocean. The design incorporated everything I had loved about my previous home: open spaces, natural materials, a profound connection to the landscape, but with sophisticated security measures and legal protections that reflected my hard-won wisdom. This new project wasn't about replacing what was lost, but about reclaiming the joy of creation that had always centered me. Each line I drew represented a step away from betrayal and toward a future shaped by my own choices, my own vision, rather than reactions to the past. As the 1-year anniversary of discovering the theft approached, I decided to mark the date not with mourning, but with celebration. A celebration of how far I had come, how much I had grown, how much I had built from the rubble. I invited a small group of friends who had supported me through the ordeal to dinner at my new loft. Cassie was there, of course. Leo, too, looking healthier and more genuinely happy than I had ever seen him. "A year ago, I thought I had lost everything that mattered," I told them, my voice full of emotion, as we raised our glasses. "What I've learned since then is that what truly matters can never really be taken from you. My creativity, my resilience, my capacity to build something beautiful, my ability to love and be loved by people who respect me, those are the real assets. And they've only grown stronger through this challenge." The gathering represented everything my parents had never understood about true wealth: that meaningful connections and personal growth far outvalued any property or bank account. The people around my table had shown me what genuine support looked like, celebrating my successes without trying to control them, and standing by me through failure without using it to diminish me. They were the family I had chosen, the family who saw me, truly saw me, for who I was. Later that evening, after my guests had departed, I stood on my balcony, watching the city lights reflect on the bay. The night breeze cool against my skin. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. Betrayal leaves scars that never completely fade. But I had built something new and valuable from the ashes of that betrayal: boundaries that protected without isolating, wisdom that informed without paralyzing, and a self-reliance that empowered without hardening. The cliffside house had been my dream, my sanctuary, my achievement. Losing it had taught me that I was capable of building new dreams, finding sanctuary within myself, and achieving things I had never imagined possible. The property was gone, a memory, but what it had truly represented, my capacity to envision and create beauty, to stand firm in my own worth, remained undiminished. As I turned to go inside, I caught sight of my reflection in the window glass. The woman looking back at me was stronger than the one who had first learned of her parents' betrayal a year earlier. She knew her worth wasn't determined by others' recognition or approval. She understood that family is defined by respect and support, not merely by blood. And most importantly, she recognized that the greatest security comes not from what you own, but from who you become through life's most challenging moments. If you've ever experienced betrayal by someone you trusted completely, I hope my story helps you recognize that healing is possible. The path forward isn't about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about integrating it into a larger narrative of growth and resilience. It's about finding your voice, setting your boundaries, and building a life on your own terms. Have you ever had to rebuild trust after a significant betrayal? How did you navigate that journey? Share your experience in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story. And if my story resonated with you, please subscribe and hit the like button to help others find this message of hope. Remember, sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as our deepest wounds. Thank you for listening, and may you find strength in your own journey of healing.